The plan tonight, we're going to be in 1 Timothy 5 again. I had originally planned on Luke chapter 13, and God willing, we'll get back to that next Sunday night. Great passage of Scripture, a few parables that are given there in regards to the kingdom, as Jesus is trying to explain. He is explaining that what the kingdom is like, and he's going to use parables for that. And so we'll be in that next week. But as far as tonight, we're in Acts. I don't know why I said Acts. That's where I'm at right there. 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy chapter number 5. With this message tonight, part of it this morning I had planned on covering 1 Timothy chapter number 5 all the way up until verse number 16, and we made it through verse 2 this morning. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Now, with this, there's an unusual amount of controversy when it comes to this passage of Scripture. Now, again, with the rest of 1 Timothy, it's not because it's difficult to understand, but it's difficult to accept sometimes. And there's things that are different, and the reality is, as time goes on, this world changes. Kind of. I went and told him yesterday, there was a man that was asking us about the sufferings of Christ and how with temptation, whether or not somebody can be proven righteous not having been tempted. And so we made reference to the fact that Jesus was in all points tempted as we are. And the proof of that was found in his 40 days of temptation in the wilderness by the devil. When Satan tempts Jesus, he tempts him, and the Bible records 3 of the temptations. Now, I assume, based on what the Scripture tells us, that he went in there to be tempted of the devil for 40 days, but it only records 3 temptations, and those 3 temptations seem to happen pretty quickly. Like for instance, when he's caught away very quickly to one place, and they go to this other place. I mean, it's all very quick things, so it didn't take 40 days for them to travel from one place to another. The concept here is that there was temptation, but the Bible records 3 of them. And it addresses those things that are the same type of temptations that we'd find all the way back in Genesis, chapter number 2, and chapter number 3. And then we would find the same thing throughout the Old Testament, all the way to 1 John, which is describing what sin is like, and the types of sin, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Jesus experienced that type of temptation, but he never gave into it, yet without sin. Was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. And so it's important when we know what Jesus went through, and that he did so for us, and the fact that he is our perfect sacrifice. We understand who Christ is as much as the Bible gives us information about him, and we now as a church ministry, we're taking these things and we're applying that truth to this body of imperfect people. We're imperfect in the sense that we brought backgrounds and we have our own sin choices that we harbor. You know, those things that God continues to work on in our lives as far as Christians go. And in all of these things, God is going to give instruction to work with people that need that help. And so there's a few things that we're going to be trying to cover. I didn't finish everything from this morning. I'm just going to go ahead and try to continue here tonight, so going through verse number 16. One of the reasons, by the way, is this is incredibly practical when it comes to the care of widows. What I was getting at with sin, the world has not changed tremendously in the sense that sin's still the same thing. We've just found new ways of going through the different avenues to exact some of those sins. But the same thing, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. Jesus was in all points tempted as we are. The world may have changed, and it's very different because of the sinfulness of it. But what we're going to find is that the world is going to seemingly be further apart from what the Bible standard is. And so the Bible standard has not changed at all. And so this is not something that Paul gave to Timothy, saying, Timothy, because you're only in the first century, you understand it back then the future, this isn't going to make sense. It's just a manual for, that present year. And we have manuals for our vehicles. I'm sure all of you, when you buy a vehicle, you probably read through the owner's manual because it tells you to read the whole thing before you operate it. And so, anyways, with that, we know that never happens. But you're supposed to. The idea here is that's not just for that model year. So this is back, AD 60 approximately. And so that's the manual for AD 60. Well, this is the manual for always. As far as the church goes, this is how things are supposed to be done. There are some transitions that are taking place. Now, what I mean by that, in the Old Testament, there is specific Pacific, in case you're wondering, is a body of water, okay? That is not what I'm talking about. So specifics are given in regards to the care of widows. And by the way, when you talk about widows, there's typically three groups of people, or usually three groups of people that are spoken of. You'll have the widows, and does anybody know the other two groups of people? Orphans. The Bible will use the word fatherless, orphans, you're right, but there's one more group, and that's the strangers. Right, as foreigners. So you have those three groups that are frequently mentioned, usually in the Old Testament. By the time you get to the New Testament, it's most frequently the widows and the fatherless, and the strangers are kind of left out as far as mention. And a lot of it, I believe, has to do with kind of the function of how things are working, especially since the church is made up of strangers. So we are from not there. And so with that being said, we are made up from everywhere. So we care for each other, which is good news because the Bible explains that he loves the strangers. That's a good thing. So we're a church of that. And so anyways, in this, he's given some instructions for this. We'll talk a little bit about the Old Testament example, talk about what that means for the church, some practical points of application for us, and also some of the ramifications as far as how we apply this today. And so first off, we establish the fact that in verses number 1 and 2 that we are a church family. We are a church family. Now, that doesn't mean that your biological family is no longer your family. And what I mean by that is you don't have to suddenly close off or shun your biological family now because you have a church family. There are church groups that advocate for that kind of thing. And that's not what he's suggesting. One of the reasons we know that is because he's relating the idea of a biological family to the church family. And so based on that function, we know that those both are both real things. But there's a different function in the way that the church should operate, but it's still within the spirit of what God intended the family to be like. And so the family then, understand that we are a family, we ought to, point number 1, is be family to widows. Be family to widows. In this, in verse number 3, the Bible says, honor widows that are widows indeed. Widows indeed. In reality, widows, the concept is not that some widows are widows and some widows are not widows, but it's widows in the sense of the spirit of that there's a necessity that they have. They're widows in the sense that they have necessity, they have need that we can take care of them. Now, there are widows that need to be taken care of in a specific way, and some that don't need to be taken care of another in that same way. But there is instruction that God's going to give in this. The other part is that while he does give instruction about the widows, he's really given a lot of instruction in regards to we as church members, as a part of the body, what we ought to be like. A lot of it has to do with the care of older people, people that are oftentimes neglected by our society. We've dumped them to be relegated, to be cared for in different ways that are just kind of forgotten. And that's wrong. That's wrong. It's not something that God has laid out. It ought to be something that we are honoring our older family members. Now, a couple things. Number 1, we are supposed to honor. In verse number 3, the Bible does say to honor widows that are widows indeed. The word honor, sometimes we just take that to mean respect. Now, that's not a bad term. There should be respect shown for widows. That's a reality. That's very true. Ephesians chapter 6, the Bible uses the same word, honor thy father and thy mother. And father and mother, which is first commandment with promise. Same word here, to honor. We should be demonstrating that type of respect to them. But even in Ephesians chapter 6, he's not necessarily given this only to children. While there is the reference in verse 1 about children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. The next verse, honor thy father and mother, he's talking about even in the course of its longevity. And so that means amongst adults, you still continue to honor your mom and dad. You'll notice in that passage in Ephesians chapter 6, there's not some parameter of honor them only if they're like really worthy of honor. Sometimes we're just being honest, is that when we consider our upbringing, there may be things that you would disagree about when it comes to your upbringing. Now, we don't have to show with the raise of hands, but how many of you were raised in such a way that maybe there's something you disagreed about your upbringing? You know, if you were raised in a home that wasn't Christian, let's just say a home of unbelievers, there was definitely some things. You weren't raised in Christianity. You weren't raised in light of the gospel. Perhaps it was certain elements of hypocrisy that really bothered you. Perhaps there were elements of abuse that were there. But the concept in regards to honor, there is limiting in regards to what we would do negatively against them. For instance, in the book of Exodus, talking about cursing our parents, that would be the opposite there of honoring, and so it's something we would avoid. And sometimes the mere fact that we are not cursing our parents is an element of honor. And so when that's provided there, God has given some instruction in regards to what we should be doing for our parents, but likewise that widows should be receiving that. In other words, you should be, understanding that they are older, verse number 2, the elder women as mothers, you should be treating the widows of this church like moms. Now, this is good news for a number of reasons. One, think about Christianity as a whole. Christianity as a whole, would we say that when we live biblical Christianity, it's different than what's done in the rest of the world? Is that accurate? Absolutely. It's very accurate. You can see it in just about anything. And so looking around at anything, think about the way advertising is out there. Advertising is not generally for like, well, we're going to put some commercials out there that are really going to appeal to independent Baptists. I guarantee you there's not going to be a single commercial in the Super Bowl tonight that's going to try to appeal to the independent Baptists that are watching. Okay, that's just not going to happen. Because they don't care, all right? It's not like by the way, they follow the money. Like, who's going to spend the money on things? Well, everybody, they know we're stingy. I think that's what it is. But anyways, with that, they're not appealing to those things because that's not what the world is designed around the way we believe things, specifically the Bible. And so in this, what he's talking about here is that while it's different, we are now in a setting where you have moms and dads in this church body, and you've multiplied having more than just one. And so yes, you do have your biological parents, but now you have another mama in the church, and that might be a couple of them because of the widows that are there. You should be treating them that way. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be now the closest person to that person in the whole world, but the point is that there ought to be that type of respect and honor demonstrated to the widows that are present within the church body. And by the way, it's not just widows, but women in general that are older. Elderly women within the church should be treated that way, have that kind of regard when it comes to the church structure, the church body. Now, in this honor, the word honor, by the way, is not just respect. In Mark chapter 7, which I mentioned this morning, Mark chapter 7, verses 5 through 13, Jesus speaking about them that are not obeying the commandment of the Lord, saying that those certain gifts are Corban, they're designated special gifts to God, and we can't honor our parents with them. And that we missed out the opportunity to honor our parents by not giving them the gifts, because we said they were for God instead. Now, what God is pointing out, though, that Jesus tells them that you're not honoring your parents, you're defiling the commandment of God, you've disobeyed God. So the honor he's talking about is not just respect, but literally some show or some transaction that would take place, some sort of financial caring for your parents. That's what's there. It's literally a material support. In other words, put your money where your mouth is when it comes to your parents, or when it comes to older people, specifically in verse number 3, according to widows. So widows indeed specifically, should be cared for in a material manner with respect. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17, the Bible says, "For the Lord your God is God of gods, and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and a terrible, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward." What God is saying is, when it comes to who God is, he is one that's so far above this human structure that is constantly considering their place and how far they can make their name known. That God's way above that. He's not trying to eke out his way in this earth to be popular or anything like that. He's God. In fact, if you think of the gods and the false gods of this world, he's above all of that. And so it does not matter where he's competing with anything. So there's no reason where he's going to try to treat certain people with respect or try to get advantage with others. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need it. He's God. And so in that, he does not regard persons. You're not going to impress him because of what you've accomplished. He's God. He's higher than anything you could possibly ever try to attempt. The next verse in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 18 says, "He doth execute the judgment." Now that sounds like, all right, he's going to bring down the hammer. The word judgment there has the idea of he's hearing the cause of, and he's going to make something happen with it. So who does he hear the cause of, or execute the judgment for? Of the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger. These are foreigners, people from outside the camp of Israel. In giving him food and raiment. In other words, God cares about them. He does say he loves even the stranger, he loves them. Even the foreigner, he loves them. He's hearing the case of these people. So you have the widow, the stranger, the fatherless, that God is hearing their case. Now, for us, we oftentimes don't think about it. We have been spoiled in our society because with many things legally, you can, as long as you pay some money, you can have a judge hear your case, right? Or maybe you can apply and have like Judge Judy do it or something. I'm not sure. I don't know how that stuff works. Not that I would ever recommend that. But you can have somebody, if anything, you can find some kind of public opinion. You can shame people publicly even just to get somebody to hear your case. And the more pitiful it seems, the better. But that's kind of a unique circumstance. And we see that, for instance, the unjust judge that Jesus makes mention of, talking about the story where a widow woman is constantly pleading and continues to pester him for an answer. Same idea here, something that's unusual for the judge to hear somebody that didn't have strong defense or strong backing. So God is saying, I've got a special place in the care, in the judgment, and in the executing the decisions on behalf of the cause of widows. Widows who didn't have somebody to defend them, didn't have the financial backing, the financial support, didn't have the representation. Fatherless children, orphans, that likewise don't have that same thing to care for them. He cares for them in a special way, as well as the foreigners. These are the ones, the strangers that have come in and they don't have family. They don't have the jobs lined up here. They don't have everything in order. They've showed up and God says, I love them. Which is wonderful, by the way, because even in Israel, when we understand the Bible describes that he loves Israel, he's saying, hey, I love those foreigners as well. I love those people outside of Israel as well. And so when they come in, he's saying, I want special attention given to them because ultimately they're helpless. They're helpless, so God loves the helpless. God loves those that have that difficulty, and he does care for them. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse number 19, so the next verse, it says, love ye therefore the stranger. So he says, I love the stranger, in verse number 18, and he says, love ye the strangers. He's telling them, you love the strangers as well, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. So you can identify with them back then from when Israel was redeemed out of Egypt. And so Psalm 68, verse 5 describes that God is a father of the fatherless and a judge of the widows, is God in his holy habitation. So in light of who God is, in God's holy habitation in which he dwells, he says in that spot he cares deeply and uniquely for widows. And so they ought to be considered as those that should get that similar regard because of the fact that God regards them as well. Now, the next part is, how do we do this? First off, we have to consider the scrutiny here, which is that they are widows indeed. Widows indeed. Now, for us, we don't usually say something indeed, but we might say indeed. That is, like, we're verifying this is truly the case. I had a teacher in college that would say indeed. He would ask us a question all the time, is the sky blue? Indeed it is. And so he'd kind of just answer it over and over again. So whenever we'd go to his class, he would ask us any question, and all of us, somewhat mockingly, would reply, indeed it is, or indeed it isn't. And so we would always respond that way, and we knew when anybody said indeed, we knew exactly who they were talking about. They were talking about Dr. Edmonds. So anyways, indeed, though, is verifying these are truly those that have this type of need. He's going to describe them in different ways in regards to being desolate, these that are in need. And so these indeed widows have some scrutiny in regards to whether or not they are widows indeed. Look at the explanation here, starting in verse number 4. Look at verse 4 and then verse 8. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. Look at verse 8. But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So I mentioned this morning, but in verse number 4, what he tells us here in regards to the widows is that there's a responsibility specifically that first off, they are cared for by their family. And so there's this specific responsibility. Not all widows are indeed required that the church takes care of them. So there are some that the church should not take care of. So when we're going to talk about the widows indeed, we're going to talk about first off the family responsibility. First off is a family responsibility. If you are a son to a widow, you have a responsibility to take care of your mother. That's just the reality of it. In fact, we can even extend that to the fact that you should be honoring your father as well in that. But with this, when we're talking about widows, you have that responsibility. But the other part, he says, if any widow have children or nephews. The word nephews there is, don't just think, well, okay, grandson's out, only the nephews. The word nephews, as you see it, it's not used a tremendous amount in the Bible. When you see it, you'll usually have a reference to the sons and then the nephews. And so the concept is a further generation. And so it does actually include the nephews as well as grandchildren. So this is just the next generation of people. So nephews is actually a little broader than just what we would consider nephews. It's that the next step away. So it's further saying that if the son, so there's not a son perhaps that takes care of them, then the next step would also have that obligation laid on them to take care of them. And so maybe you are a nephew or the grandchild of somebody that is a widow, then you have the responsibility borne on you. According to verse number 8, God says that that widow is a part of your household. So that's the type of responsibility you have, and so you ought to maintain it. Verse number 8, usually we take verse number 8 when we talk about it, and it's not unjust to talk about it because it's based on this truth, but usually verse number 8 will talk about the responsibility of a parent to take care of their child, right? We'll talk about that. You need to work and take care of your home. But according to this passage in context, it's literally the responsibility of the children to take care of their parents. That's what the context of this passage is. And so this is how important it is. It does also say, by the way, that the reason they should do this is it says two things. One, it's a show of piety at home, the idea of this demonstration of holiness. This is something that we're doing in faith because it's the right thing to do. Why do we do this? Because God says this is right. This is the proper thing. But then the second one is to requite their parents. In essence, the word requite is pay back. For instance, in Genesis chapter 50, verse 15, and when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, so Joseph's father passed away, and he's got a bunch of brethren. Well, his brothers had thrown him in a pit and then sold him into slavery and then pretended that he was dead to dad, or at least made dad. They didn't directly lie to him. It was like, we don't know what happened to him with, well, actually, I guess that's a lie. But anyways, they found that coat of many colors torn with blood randomly, and they don't have any idea. So they gave the idea that he died. And so anyways, all that being said, the brothers get to thinking, well, Dad said, don't kill us, don't hurt us. And so when Dad died, they're thinking, okay, now Joseph is going to requite what has happened. It says, Joseph will peradventure hate us and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. So he's going to pay us back for the evil. And so you'll find the same word used a number of times throughout the Old Testament usually. But when it comes to this word, he's talking about paying back. When it comes to why we're taking care of our parents, it's the right thing to do. It's an expectation that God has. But it's also as a payback for all that your parents did in your provision. Now you might say, well, my parents didn't do much. I do believe that there is an element that one of the reasons we see a lot of our older generations tucked away in a place they've forgotten has to do with the tremendous amount of bad parenting. There is an element to that. But there's also a lot, and so there, in essence, there's some kind of paying back that's taking place there. It's not proper. It's not proper either way. But the other part is oftentimes there's such a bitterness there in regards to parents and things like that, that we're oftentimes paying back only certain things when he's describing the fact that we are paying back that which is within piety. These are good things. They clothed you, they fed you, and usually they changed you, right? So that's what's happening there. There is something then that we're taking care of a physical need for our parents. This is what he's providing. So within this piety, these are the good things. And so yes, maybe they didn't provide everything perfectly for you. That's fine. That's fine. The issue is that you shouldn't be harboring that bitterness there. You have a responsibility as Christians to be demonstrating this care for your parents. You ought to be doing it. You should be taking care of this. This is there's a limitation then on these types of widows. The other part, if you will, go down to verse number 9. Excuse me. Verse number 9 says, "Let not a widow be taken into the number under 80 years old, having been the wife of one man." On this one, 80 is the age 60, and so good news with this. In verse number 9, it talks about the women that are 60 and below, that they should not be treated with the same type of widow category that we would treat a widow that's over 60 years of age. And what this is meaning is that there's a certain method that those that are under 60 years of age ought to be treated with when it comes to being widows. Remember that when anybody's a widow, they've gone through difficulty. They've gone through loss. It doesn't mean that doesn't matter. It just means that there's a different function. When we're talking about the care for a widow, we're talking about a way in which we're making sure their needs are provided for. it's not the church's responsibility to provide the needs for widows that are under 60 years of age. Can those needs be provided for? We'll talk about that in a moment, but the answer is yes, it could be. But it's not the responsibility to provide for them in such a way that they're living from the church. In this, he does put some limitations in regards to even their testimonies beforehand. So is it the job then that the church takes care of every widow out there? For instance, sometimes it'll be that there's widows in proximity to the church. We can probably go through our neighborhoods here and find widows that are around. Is it the church's job then to take care of all the widows around here? For one thing, that would be impossible. We cannot possibly take care of financially all the needs of every widow. The other thing is not all widows are within the bounds of the responsibilities of the church, and we see this as part of it because, for one thing, there is limitation in regards to their marriage. It was based on not just that they have been married. He's talking about the fact that they've had a proper biblical marriage. All right, so it wasn't just an issue of immorality that continued on through several marriages, and then they're randomly 60 years old now, so the church has to take care of them. But that they've demonstrated that fidelity in their marriage even before that took place. The other thing is of proper testimony. So women of improper testimony would not be included in this number. Verse number 10, well reported of for good works. If she have brought up children, if she have lodged strangers, if she have washed the saints' feet, if she have relieved the afflicted, if she have diligently followed every good work. Now, the question is, have you done that? Say, oh, well, these widows ought to be the godliest women on the entire planet for that. There's two elements to this, and I'm not going to get into all of that because we could spend a lot of time. But partly is that when it comes to the widows, what he's demonstrating here is that it's not just that they were godly, but there's an expectation amongst the widows that they're going to continue serving the Lord. And so, and we're actually going to see this, we skipped through a couple verses on this, but it's actually demonstrated in both passages. Sometimes we get this idea like, well, we're older, we're done. We get that idea sometimes. Retired people, did once you retired, were you just like, you had nothing else to do, kind of sat around, did nothing? No, usually retired people explain to me, yeah, we're busier now. Now, sometimes not the case. Sometimes not the case. I understand that. But the point is that there's something to do. Widows are not now a group of people that have to do nothing. He's relaying a group of people that have been busy serving the Lord, and now there's going to be compensation from the church into providing for them as they continue to serve the Lord. And so this is what he's expressing in this, and there's more that we can unpack on that, but this is the idea that he's explaining here in these passages of Scripture. And for that reason, for instance, if they are younger, what's the recourse? What should be done if there's a widow now that's under 60 years of age? It's not the church's responsibility to care for their material needs. Verse number 11. But the younger widows, next word is refuse. For when they have begun to wax wanton against Christ, they will marry. So in this, what he's talking about is when it comes to widows, that there's a possibility for them to wax wanton. How many of you used that this week in your conversation? Yeah, I was at work, and then I waxed wanton, and I went and got some coffee. Normally, we don't use the word wanton. It has the idea of wandering, and so they will begin to wander. These widows, if the church is providing for their needs, so let's just say there's a woman who's 45 years of age, her husband passes away in the church. She has nobody else to take care of her, so the family responsibility hasn't gone into play, so the church is taking care of her. What is she going to do? Is she going to be idle? Well, if she's not had a testimony of serving the Lord previously, for one thing, she would be. But even if she does have that, at that youth, there's still the energy and the desire to do stuff, and there's this propensity to wander. There are in the Scriptures a number of things basically saying that if you're in this type of scenario, you're probably going to fall into these certain sins. For instance, we warned about young preachers, didn't we? We talked about that earlier in the book. Young preachers, what happens with young preachers? They're prone to pride. That's what he talks about. So not being a novice, let's be lifted up, right? This is what he's talking about here. Likewise for these women, if you then apply this care for them in such a way that they're cared for without this doing what they're supposed to, they will be wax wanton. This is going to be their inclination to wander in regards to the things of the Lord. And what he describes in this passage, they will wax wanton against Christ. They will marry. The idea is their service is not just going to be for God. They're going to want to enter into marriage. Marriage is not a bad thing, but it's not going to be a life now basically not married, serving the Lord 100% of the time. There's more conversation to be had on that, but let me just mention this. Verse number 12, having damnation because they have cast off their first faith. They removed that priority in regards to service for God in order to do something else. The word damnation, the Bible does not always use the word damnation as they're going to go to hell. Okay, sometimes we think that, for instance, the word saved, if you look at the word saved, the Bible doesn't always mean that the word saved is that you're going to go to heaven. Sometimes you can be saved from something. For instance, if I were to ask a random person on the street, have you been saved? The question is, have you been saved from what? Likewise, damnation would be that there's a negative consequence. There's some kind of judgment here on this earth or to come because of what's taking place. And so what he's saying here is that when we take care of the wrong people, we set them up for bad consequences. That's what he's telling us. And so it's pretty simple. So with this, what we have is a few things. One, when it comes to widows, a widow that the church takes care of ought to be people that are widows indeed. They are of a certain age, 60 years or above. They've been serving the Lord. Their family themselves is not taking care of them or is incapable of taking care of them. And so then it becomes the church's responsibility to take care of them. Also, I did miss something in verse number 5. Now she that is a widow indeed and desolate trusteth in God and continueth in supplications and prayers night and day. They have a proper testimony, but they are also desolate. So there is a point that they get the church's help because they need the church's help. So what does this mean? If there's a widow who is 145 years old, and she just happens to own diamond mines in Africa, and she comes here, we could make the case, and there's accusations made against churches, well, you should be taking care of her. So cut a check, make sure those needs are taken. She's not desolate. She's not in that spot. And society has made it largely now, we're trying to avoid women to be taken care of at all in any way by anybody else, because that would show some kind of bad things, I guess, societally. Listen, we've always taken care of the generations before us until recent history. So if women are set up financially, there's not a desolation that requires us as a church to write a check for them. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's other ways in which we can meet the needs. And so anyways, a few things. So we need to make sure they're widows indeed, above 60 years of age. If they're under 60 years of age, the Bible tells us that they should be getting married. This is what God says. All right, this is what he's put in this passage of Scripture in verse number 14. I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. Get married is what he's telling them. That's an okay thing to do. That's a good thing to do, and this is what God has instructed for them to do. If they don't, they'll be caught up in everything else. Like according to verse 13, they're going to be busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. This is what they're going to get caught up with. Why? Because they have the time for it. One of the most dangerous things for anybody is idle time. And it's interesting, the Bible talks about the fact that what they'll get caught up in is conversation. People like to talk. My wife and I were talking, like, the guys here, we talk. A lot of us talk. But I was saying, like, the reason we talk a lot is because when we come to church, this is like our only time to talk. Because the rest of the time we work. And so we're busy, so this is our one time to talk. So, man, it's okay to talk, all right? Don't feel like you're turning in your man card or anything by talking. Okay, that's a good thing. But anyways, when there's nothing else to do, oftentimes people will talk, they will gossip, and God is saying, let's protect people from that. And so he's saying younger women who have more ability to be able to move around more ability to go to people's houses, more time to spend on Facebook or on the phone or whatever it may be, they're going to be inclined to gossip, and so you can actually set them up for problems. Trying to think if there's anything else on these. So when it comes to the care, I want to relate two things. One is we are going to talk about the care specifically of widows, but I also want to talk about the care for those that are in need. Knowing that there's multiple applications in the Old Testament, it talks about the widows and the fatherless. We're going to talk about using our resources as a church then to care for people that are in need. For one thing, the church does have responsibility to care for widows in a financial way if there's a financial need. This is what God is relaying within certain context. Once again, we've laid out the context: above 60 years old, family first, first set of children, for instance, the son age, and then you would have the nephew age or the other group of people. So basically 2 levels of extended family that would take care of them. The other part has to be with their testimony. So they're just running amok, but they're widows. That doesn't leave us as a church with a financial culpability in taking care of them. So they need to do so. If they're under 60 years of age, the Bible instructs that they should be getting married. Now, in this, what do we do with this? A couple things. Well, number one is that we cannot support all needs. all needs are a lot of needs. We are called Charity Baptist Church. For us, we know what that means. We're talking about, 1 Corinthians 13, the love of God, and we're talking about charity, this love from us to others, not a reciprocal one, but such that we give of ourselves, such as Christ gave himself for us. We know what that means. But when it goes online, the word charity is the only thing that people hear, and so we get calls every single week. Every single week we get calls about just about everything. We get calls about needing gas. Hey, we just need a couple gallons of gas to get from point A to point B. Usually, and I'm just going to be honest, the most usual story that we get for why somebody needs gas is because of a health need, usually a son that has a heart condition. I'm telling you, that's the most common story I get is a son that has a heart condition, and so they need to get to a certain hospital far away. So even though we're here in Indianapolis, and it's down the road. But the point is they need to go to another state or something, and so they just need a couple gallons of gas. And so they'll have like a 1985 truck, and they only need like $5 to get down the road. I'm like, that's not going to get you to the interstate, much less get you to a hospital far away. But this is the most common one that we'll get. It's not our job, though, to take care of them. We'll have a lot of other things. We'll have a lot of requests when it comes to like November, December. Usually December, we'll have people call the church and say, hey, we need help to pay for Christmas for our families. Now, it's not the church's responsibility to buy gifts for kids. It's not. We enjoy doing it. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, during Christmas time, a lot of people are giving gifts out, and that's fine. That's great. I would love to be generous with other people. That's fine. But that's not a church responsibility. That's just a side of generosity that people are generous and want to do that. That's fine. The other thing, let's think practically, doctrinally, the last thing a kid needs is just a whole bunch more gifts for Christmas. And so that's not helpful either. So anyway, it's not our job to take care of all needs, but the Bible does talk about the need for the helpless. If there are needs, we should be desiring to take care of them. The other part is that the needs, while we can't support all, we have a priority of our resources. We should be prioritizing our resources. The priority of our resources as a church is our church. Now, it's fine if we're able to take care of needs somewhere else. Lord's put it on your heart to do certain things. If we're going to take care of needs outside the church, that's not tied in with this ministry, it ought to be on the hearts of Christians to do so. But when it comes to our body here, we do prioritize the needs of people that are not able to help themselves, as he describes here for the widows, according to James chapter 1, also for the fatherless. In fact, the Bible describes that pure religion undefiled is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows. He's describing both of those groups. That's what we're doing. And so there is a priority of our resource on those that cannot help themselves. Thirdly, we should not eliminate personal responsibility. This is incredibly important. He makes a very clear case, according to verse number 4, that when it comes to family, there's a personal responsibility for family to take care of those needs. It's important. It's vital. We need to be doing so. Let me encourage you, make sure you're taking care of your family. You might be saying, no, the church should be taking care of them. No. Priority number one is family members. Christians, take care of your family members. It's important. It's vital. And if you're not doing so, the Bible describes you in verse number 8. We're talking about widows, yes, but also, of course, within your own family, hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. He's describing, unfortunately, a lot of Christians nowadays that just relegate them, hoping that Social Security will take care of things, not laying up for those things at all, that they should be taking care of other individuals. What that means is when we think about like retirement and things of that nature, part of that should be that we're considering the care of those in our extended family that we plan on taking care of. But that goes against grain. That goes against our common bond, because right now we take care of us four, no more, right? But this is not what God is saying. God is saying that our care ought to be then for the widows in our family, specifically for sons and nephews, or grandsons as well. And so we should not eliminate personal responsibility. Also, number 4, do not help in a way that will hurt somebody's future. In this, he's instructing in regards to young widows and things that would harm them. This type of care that would only facilitate further problems is not going to help anybody. Occasionally, we get help requests specifically for the hotel right down the corner here, and they'll ask, can you help us pay for a couple of days of rent? There are times that people fall on hard times, and if you want to help them, there's nothing wrong with that. Knock yourself out. There's a number of times my wife and I've gone, we've personally paid for hotel rooms or paid for gas, and we'll do that personally, but it's not going to come from the church. The other part is there has to be a pressing need of helplessness that's not going to harm their future. If you are simply propagating a problem, it's not helping them. Let me give you one of the most common examples of this is rent. If somebody needs help with their rent, but they don't have a job, or their job is so low wage that they couldn't possibly maintain their rent without a constant supply of people providing it, it's time to go ahead and make the decision and find a different place of living. All right, it's not the job of everybody else to take care of it, just because you want to continue to live in that same place. You might say, well, I'm going to have to move to an area that's lesser or whatever. That's a part of it. And it may seem harsh, but the reality is you're only contributing to a consistent problem that's not going to actually help them. And he's warning this of the young widows that can get caught up in gossip and get caught up in a lot of other problems if we don't take care of them in the proper way, or if we do care for them in a way that will actually harm their future. We talk about, we understand the story or I don't know, the old lesson, the old adage about teach a man to fish, right? The whole point is if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. The point is that this is what we're doing. Do not continue to help them propagate their current problem. Also, do not neglect our greatest responsibilities. Namely, in this one is the care of our own households. You have that responsibility. And so while we're encouraging personal responsibility, we likewise need to make sure that we're continuing in our personal responsibilities. Care for our families, care for our church. When it comes to who you are, you have responsibility within the church. Take care of people within the church. Do it. Go out of your way for that. I say, well, that's pastor's job. No, it's a church's job. I'm a part of it. I'm not exempt from it, but it's also not my job to do 10 times as much in regards to care for people, because I'm a part of this church just as much as you guys are. And so likewise, we all take care of those needs together. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This does reflect the testimony of Christ. So I want you to put it in perspective. When we think of what Jesus Christ has done for us, he saved us. We are not going to hell. That changes everything, doesn't it? It changes the issues of our ups and downs. I mean, if you have a bad day, at your very worst day, you can die and go to heaven. All right, this is what's out there. Regardless the affliction that we go through, even the very worst things you can go through, the Bible describes that this is light affliction. This is that time period that we're in. This is it. This is it. This is as bad. Whatever the world can throw you is as bad as it gets. And yet in that, we know that God cares for us. We should be reflecting that care for us in the way we reflect, in the way we care for each other. This is what Christ has done. Likewise, we ought to demonstrate that to each other. There's a consistent message in the Bible that you'll find constantly, that it is expected that the people of God take care of God's people. Over and over again. The mistreatment even of strangers, for instance, in the Old Testament, is something that God judges Israel about because of the fact that they mistreat the strangers, the ones that are dwelling within them. When it comes to what they would do, you think about the tithe. Nowadays, we get paid weekly, and the way that the church operates financially is by our consistent giving as God has prospered you throughout the week, as God has blessed you. But in the Old Testament, that tithe for the Levites that was given when they received it one time a year. There would be another one that was given specifically for something different. So one tithe of all they had for the Levites and the work of God, right? The second one had to do with their involvement in festivals and the involvement in worship of God, and maybe you can even use that money to pay your way down there to the festival or to that feast. So that was your involvement there. The third tithe that was done. So by the way, if you're keeping count, if you have a money pot for the year, you give a tenth of it to God, then you're going to give another tenth of it. You're now at 20% of what you've given. And so that's a lot. And then there would be a third tithe every third year. And so on some years, you're giving 30% of your income to the work of the Lord. That one was designed to be given to the strangers, to the widows, and to the fatherless. That's what it was for. And so in that provision, God set up manners in which that would be taken care of. That has translated to the fact that the church is now responsible for that care. So this is what we're doing. Even in harvesting, you look at the book of Ruth, for instance. Ruth goes back with her mother-in-law, and while they're back there in Bethel, they're there, and she's going to go glean from the fields of Boaz. They have gleaned, but they have left some. So basically, if the harvester were going through and they grab stuff as they're moving through and they missed a piece, you leave it. So Boaz said, hey, just go ahead and leave some extras back there. Also, the corners wouldn't be gleaned. This didn't produce as much, but it left some. And so people could come in, and they can actually harvest in a respectful way to maintain their own supply. If they didn't own property, if they were not employed by some of the farmers in the area, they could still do that work and make sure they continue to be fed because God cared. So God is saying you need to reflect God's heart in caring for the needs of others. And so these are principles that we ought to live by when we consider the care for other people, specifically widows, of course, but then we would translate that in regards to the care for other individuals, such as the fatherless and strangers. Those are the without in this case. Just to point out, you might say, well, no, this is only for the care of widows. I want you to think about a practical point of application. Look down in verse number 18, and then we'll be done with this. For the scripture saith, thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn. Now, there is a specific application of this. In the Old Testament, the Bible describes that when it comes to the ox, when the ox is working, and so it's treading out this grain and all it's going through, it says don't muzzle it. Don't cover its mouth as it's doing this work. In other words, while it's working, it should be able to eat of the fruit of its labor. That should be taken care of. And so what Timothy is instructed in by Paul is this is important. Don't do that. Why? Because according to this verse, and the laborer is worthy of his reward. Somebody that's laboring should be able to participate of the reward, and they're worthy of it. This is something that's right because they're working it. And so the relationship that he's making in this, according to verse number 17, is that the elders likewise, in their compensation for the work that they're doing for God, they should be paid because oxen get to eat the grain. That's why. So I'm an oxen, according to this one. I say, oh, no, wait a second. The pastor is not an oxen. Well, no, I'm not an oxen, but that's the principle that's laid out there. And so when we see the principle as far as care for widows there, we're likewise seeing a principle in regards to caring for people that are incapable of caring for themselves. So we're applying several principles because this principle is going to be for the care of people that are in need. All right? So let's go ahead and pray, and we'll be dismissed. Thank you, Father, for the time you've given us in this passage. Help us, Lord, in our mindset to have a want, have a desire to care for the people that are about us, Lord, people that need it. I just think of widows. I know that widows are going through difficult times, thinking specifically tomorrow being Valentine's Day and how many long for and desire to see their spouses who they miss. God, I'm praying, Father, that you would comfort their hearts. Lord, help us as a church to look for those needs, that we can meet them as those needs would present themselves. Also, that we would be consistent in our care, in our desire, Lord, to help others that are in need, that are incapable of helping themselves, the helpless, that would be there for them, that we would be constantly encouraging them, and we'd be what we're supposed to, or that we'd just be eager to apply your scriptures as you give to us. So we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.